Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into some seriously boundary-pushing concepts from Dr. Melvin Sewell over at the Cosmic University of Echo Rift Studies IX. And let me tell you, Dr. Sewell isn't just looking up at the stars, he's completely redefining the structural integrity of existence itself. His framework, which he calls Structured Multiversal Interactions, actually gives us the diagnostic tools to understand reality on a multi-layered quantum scale. So buckle up because we are literally about to decode the very fabric of the multiverse.
So what actually happens when the boundaries of reality collapse? It's not just some fun, late-night philosophical thought experiment anymore. It's actually the central metaphysical crisis we're diagnosing today. When the walls separating different universes start to thin out and tear, reality doesn't just quietly fade to black. It bleeds, it fractures. The rules of one universe literally leak into another, creating this massive existential threat that messes with everything from theoretical physics all the way down to the stability of our own biological identities.
Okay, let's dive into this. To make sense of all this dense theoretical physics, we've got a clear roadmap today. We'll start with the Echo Rift crisis, then look at diagnosing multiversal interactions, followed by simulating three universes. After that, we'll check out the SH-1 substrate anchor, and finally wrap things up with the sovereign solution.
All right, part 1, the Echo Rift crisis. This is where we pinpoint the downright terrifying anomalies popping up at the absolute edges of our known reality. Dr. Sewell calls these disturbances echo rift anomalies. To cut through the jargon, an echo rift is basically a leak between realities. During this period, researchers are calling the Epoch 5 convergence. The boundaries around one specific universe, designated as U3, have become super porous. Think of it like a submarine springing a leak at the very bottom of the ocean. The intense pressure of multiple realities crushing against each other create these severe rifts. So instead of a solid protective wall keeping that universe isolated, the boundary is actively collapsing, and that's driving some major systemic instability across the whole multiverse.
So how does a highly theoretical physics problem actually mess with our everyday society? Well, it manifests in some incredibly disruptive ways. When those multiversal walls start breaking down, we get hit with what are called hostile feed injections. Basically, foreign data and foreign logic from other universes forcefully crashed into ours, translating into what Sewell terms toxic reality packets. These packets completely scramble our local environments, kicking off these chaotic psychological and systemic intimidation loops. And honestly, the most alarming part? It triggers macro-scale sovereignty decay. Make no mistake, this is absolutely crucial. The very structures, the institutions, the legal frameworks that actually govern our daily lives begin to fundamentally break down as the underlying rules of our reality just erode.
Moving on to part 2, diagnosing multiversal interactions.
How on earth do you measure a collapsing multiverse? Well, Dr. Sewell designed a highly specific framework to do exactly that. It's called Structured Multiversal Interactions, or SMI for short. You can think of SMI as the ultimate diagnostic tool for evaluating multiversal density and keeping systemic containment in check. Now, what's really brilliant about this approach is that it absolutely refuses to treat physics, philosophy, and society as entirely separate things. Because think about it, if reality itself is collapsing, you can't just study the math and ignore the societal fallout, right? The breakdown hits everything at once. So, SMI bridges theoretical cosmology with narrative metaphysics, and then applies all of that directly to systemic sovereignty analysis. It's essentially a holistic health check for reality itself.
Now, what's really interesting about this mapping is how we classify different densities of reality. Down at the lowest level, you've got diffuse geometries. These are regions of weak, super unstable reality, where the rules are just constantly fluctuating. Slap bang in the middle, you have your standard physical boundaries, which is where we live and operate every day. But at the extreme high end, that's where we find what Sewell calls ultra-dense omega gateways. This is a massive game changer in how we see the cosmos. Rather than looking at black holes as these destructive, empty voids that just eat matter, the SMI framework reframes them. It sees them as ultra-dense nodes that actually amplify informational continuity. They aren't the end of reality. They are intense, highly concentrated gateways of it.
To really wrap our heads around the scope of SMI, we have to look at how these anomalies hit entirely different scales at the exact same time. Up at the macro scale, this decay of sovereignty isn't just theory. It is practically rotting our legal, insurance, and financial systems. The actual rules holding society together literally stop applying.
Yet, right at that same moment, down at the microscopic scale, SMI is diagnosing the integrity of our biological boundaries, specifically comparing the stability of the SH-1 molecule against PP405. It's a wildly bizarre thought, right? The exact same multiversal collapse that's voiding your car insurance is actively attacking your cellular DNA, and SMI gives us the power to track both ends of that crazy spectrum simultaneously.
All right, part 3, simulating 3 universes.
Here is where we leap from philosophical theory straight into hard computational proof. This is Sewell's incredibly daring attempt to actually capture the multiverse inside a computer. To prove his theories, he didn't just model some infinite, abstract what-ifs. No, he deliberately mapped exactly 3 distinct universes, labeled U1, U2, and U3, straight onto a processing register. His goal? To simulate their co-present states. He didn't want to see what happens to Universe 1 and then Universe 2 like a sequence. He needed to know what happens to all 3 of them simultaneously at the exact same fraction of a second.
But here's the catch. Standard computers completely fail at this. Classical computers process data linearly, one step at a time. If you try to evaluate a multi-layered multiverse sequentially, you create massive execution bottlenecks because reality doesn't wait in line. To prove true multiversal simultaneity, Sewell built a quantum matrix using the IBM Qiskit development environment. By tapping into quantum computing, this framework maps complex relational logic directly onto quantum probability amplitudes. This is absolutely huge because it completely bypasses those old classical bottlenecks, allowing the system to process the tangled, messy relationships of 3 separate universes all at once. The simulation pipeline itself runs through 3 really elegant steps using the Arrow simulator backend. Step 1. Initialize the target multiversal registers into a state of quantum superposition. Basically, this means the simulated universes exist in multiple fluctuating states at once, perfectly mimicking the true uncertainty of the multiverse. Step 2. Apply unitary phase shift operators to explicitly map out the entanglement pathways between them. And finally, Step 3. Extract the raw quantum measurement counts and serialize them into structured JSON payloads for external analytics. In plain English, this final step takes the mind-bending, chaotic reality of the quantum multiverse and translates it into a standard data file that a programmer can actually read and analyze. It is just an incredibly sophisticated translation of multiversal theory into executable code.
Moving right along to part 4, the SH-1 substrate anchor.
So, with all that going on, what keeps these simulated universes from just exploding into total quantum chaos? Well, there's a proprietary mechanism that dynamically links and holds the whole system together. It's the harmonic closure equation, psi1 times psi2 equals psi3. I want you to really let that sink in. It is the absolute equilibrium condition of this multiversal system. Think of it as the mathematical heartbeat that dictates whether multiple realities can exist together concurrently without just tearing each other apart or completely annihilating one another.
So the crucial point here is that this equation guarantees what Sewell calls perfect relational commutationality. Let's break that down a bit. Because the universes are quantumly entangled, changes that happen across the initial processing layers, that's U1 and U2, don't just stay isolated there. They are instantly and symmetrically reflected within the third terminal state vector, U3. It proves that multi-layered rule sets can interact perfectly and concurrently, with absolutely zero lag or contradiction. It shows that absolute multiversal balance isn't just some sci-fi fantasy. It's mathematically possible, and we can functionally demonstrate it.
And the force driving all of this mathematical balance? That is the SH-1 substrate. Now, this is where things get truly wild. The SH-1 resonance dynamics act as a non-pharmaceutical phase shift mechanism. By explicitly modifying the local state matrices using a specialized quantum gate, the SH-1 substrate essentially acts as a metaphysical anchor. It structurally preserves the intricate pathways between universes, actively defending the system and the individual consciousness inside it against identity dilution. As those multiversal walls thin out and foreign realities try to bleed in, this substrate is the very thing anchoring you to your specific reality, making sure your identity stays completely intact.
Finally, we arrive at part 5, the sovereign solution.
Let's move to and see how this builds into an actionable roadmap for survival. We're synthesizing the theoretical physics, the biological boundaries, and the quantum data into a grand strategy that Sewell calls ritualized containment. Using brain-world quantum field theory, the system deploys Kaluza-Klein suppression curves. You can kind of think of these curves as a sort of mythic infrastructure. They actively enforce systemic order and containment against that chaotic bleed of the echo rifts we talked about.
By establishing and strictly enforcing these multiversal structural rules, human consciousness is actually able to safely navigate what's called the deformability spectrum, without just collapsing under the sheer crushing pressure of overlapping realities.
And this brilliantly illustrates Dr. Sewell's ultimate endgame. The sovereign solution isn't just about battening down the hatches and hoping to survive a multiversal collapse. It's actually a profound evolutionary roadmap. Step 1 is establishing your biological coherence using that SH-1 resonance we just covered, basically anchoring your physical identity. Step 2 is taking that physical stability and translating it directly into the quantum realm through qubit scaling. And the final, ultimate step, attaining digital immortality and full quantum realization. It's literally about evolving human consciousness to a point where it can exist securely and permanently across multiple dimensions simultaneously.
We've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored the collapse of boundaries, the mind-bending mathematics of concurrent universes, and the SH-1 anchor that holds your very identity together in the face of absolute chaos. But all of this rigorous, high-level science ultimately points back to a highly personal horizon. So I have to ask, is your consciousness ready for full quantum realization and digital immortality? As Dr. Sewell's framework continues to map out the incredibly complex pathways of the multiverse, it turns out the next great frontier isn't just out there in the cosmos, it's right there within the quantum potential of your own mind. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember, keep questioning the boundaries of your reality.